Karen thought she could steal her black neighbor's packages without consequences, until he set a trap that left the entire neighborhood laughing, and her smelling worse than a garbage truck. Derrick Johnson had always been a man of patience. A 38-year-old IT specialist, he had lived in Willow Creek Estates for nearly 5 years. His quiet suburban home was his sanctuary, and he worked hard to keep it that way. But recently, something strange had been happening. Packages he ordered online kept disappearing from his front porch. At first he thought it was just a mistake by the delivery company. But when it kept happening, Derrick knew someone was stealing them. One evening, Derrick returned home from work to find yet another package gone. It had been a replacement keyboard for his workstation. Frustrated, he checked the footage from his doorbell camera. What he saw made his jaw clench. His neighbor, Karen, president of the Homeowners Association, was walking up his porch, casually picking up the package and strolling away like it was hers. Karen was notorious in the neighborhood. She acted like she owned the entire block, barking orders about lawn height, mailbox paint, and holiday decorations. Most neighbors avoided confrontation with her. But Derrick was different. He wasn't going to let her get away with stealing his property. That night, Derrick sat at his kitchen table, thinking. He could file a police report, but with Karen's HOA connections, he doubted much would happen. Then an idea struck him. If Karen loved taking his packages so much, maybe he should give her one she'd never forget. As the thought grew in his mind, a sly smile crept across his face. He knew exactly what to do. The plan was simple, harmless, but unforgettable. Karen was about to meet her match, and the surprise he had in store would make the entire neighborhood laugh for months to come. The next morning, Derrick took a quiet walk around the neighborhood. He greeted a few neighbors. Mrs. Thompson, the retired school teacher who always watered her roses, and Malik, a young father who often jogged with his toddler in a stroller. Both of them mentioned the same thing. Packages had gone missing from their porches too. Derrick raised an eyebrow. So it wasn't just me. He didn't reveal what he knew just yet. But inside, he felt his suspicion harden. Karen wasn't just targeting him. She had made a habit of stealing from multiple families. The thought made Derrick's plan feel even more justified. Later that day, Derrick ran into Karen herself. She was strutting down the sidewalk in her usual manner, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose. "Derrick," she said in her sharp voice, "you really should repaint your fence. It's lowering the property value of the entire neighborhood." Derrick forced a polite smile, biting back the urge to call her out right then. "Thanks for the advice, Karen. I'll look into it." She gave him a smug nod, completely oblivious to the fact that he had caught her on camera just the night before. Back inside his home, Derrick pulled up the footage again, watching Karen's audacity frame by frame. He could take this video to the HOA board, but he knew Karen had her allies there. No, this needed to be handled differently. That evening, Derrick called Malik over for a chat. He showed him the footage. Malik's eyes widened, then he burst out laughing. "Man, I knew she was shady, but stealing boxes? That's low." "Exactly," Derrick said. "So I've got a little plan, but I'll need something unique." Malik grinned. "What are you thinking?" Derrick leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Ever seen a skunk up close?" Derrick wasn't a man who liked conflict, but he did believe in lessons. He wanted Karen to stop her nonsense once and for all. So instead of reporting her, he decided on something far more creative and a little mischievous. Malik chuckled as Derrick explained his idea. "Bro, you're telling me you want to put a skunk in one of your boxes? That's evil genius." "Not harmful," Derrick corrected, raising a finger. "Just memorable. She needs to feel embarrassed enough that she won't try this again, and besides, she'll never admit what happened if it makes her look foolish." The two friends began plotting. Malik knew a guy, Jake, who volunteered with animal control. With one quick phone call, Malik arranged a meeting. Later that evening, Jake stopped by Derrick's house with a secure carrier. Inside, curled up and looking oddly calm, was a young skunk. "Don't worry," Jake said with a grin. "This little guy won't hurt anyone. He just has a natural defense system. Handle him carefully and he'll be fine." Derrick prepared a decoy package, a medium-sized cardboard box with plenty of air holes punched in the sides. He placed the carrier inside, making sure the skunk was comfortable and could breathe. Then he taped the box neatly shut, printing a fake shipping label to make it look authentic. As he placed the box on his porch, Derrick couldn't help but laugh. The thought of Karen strutting up with her entitled smirk, only to get the shock of her life, was priceless. "Tomorrow," Derrick said, standing with his arms crossed, "is going to be a day the HOA won't forget." Malik patted him on the shoulder. "Man, I'll bring popcorn." For the first time in weeks, Derrick felt excited to see what would happen next. The morning sun rose over Willow Creek Estates, casting golden light across the neat lawns and freshly trimmed hedges. Derrick sat by his front window with a cup of coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the package he had carefully placed on his porch. His heart raced with anticipation. Today was the day Karen would finally get what she deserved. He didn't have to wait long. Around 10 a.m. Karen appeared, dressed in her usual HOA patrol outfit, khaki pants, a collared shirt, and oversized sunglasses. Clipboard in one hand, she strutted down the street like she owned every house in sight. Derrick leaned forward in his chair, hardly breathing. Sure enough, her steps slowed as she spotted the box on Derrick's porch. She glanced around, pretending to check a flower bed, then casually strolled up the walkway. Derrick chuckled softly. Classic Karen. Through the window, he saw her bend down, pick up the box, and give it a little shake. "Probably another waste of money," she muttered under her breath, loud enough that Derrick's doorbell camera captured every word. Derrick's grin widened. She tucked the package under her arm and strutted away like she had just done the neighborhood a favor. What she didn't know was that Derrick and Malik were already watching from inside, recording everything. "Bro, this is gold," Malik whispered, holding up his phone as he filmed Karen's every move. Derrick nodded, sipping his coffee. "Wait until she gets home. The fun part hasn't even started yet." As Karen disappeared into her house across the street, the two men exchanged a look of satisfaction. The bait was set, the trap had been sprung, and soon Karen was about to learn that stealing wasn't just wrong, it could also stink. Inside her living room, Karen plopped the stolen package onto her coffee table with a self-satisfied smirk. To her, taking Derrick's deliveries wasn't theft, it was community regulation. She convinced herself that she was protecting the neighborhood from unnecessary clutter. She grabbed a pair of scissors and sliced through the tape, muttering, "Let's see what kind of nonsense he ordered this time." The moment she lifted the box flaps, everything went wrong. With a sharp rustle, the skunk inside sprang up, startled by the sudden light. Its little black and white body tensed, tail shooting straight into the air. Before Karen could even process what she was looking at, a foul mist sprayed across her face, her clothes, and the expensive rug beneath her feet. "Ah!" she shrieked, stumbling backward and knocking over a lamp. The stench hit her instantly, an overwhelming, eye-watering, gut-churning odor that clung to everything it touched. She gagged, waving her arms wildly, but the smell only grew stronger. Across the street, Derrick and Malik sat in Derrick's car, both phones recording through the open windows. Karen's scream echoed through the neighborhood, followed by the sound of furniture clattering. Moments later, she burst out of her front door, coughing and fanning herself with her hands, her face twisted in horror. "Oh my God, it smells like death," she wailed, stumbling onto her lawn. Neighbors peeked out from their doors and windows, whispering to each other. Some even pulled out their own phones to record the bizarre spectacle. Derrick leaned back in his seat, trying to keep a straight face, but Malik was already doubled over, laughing uncontrollably. "Man," Malik wheezed, tears in his eyes. "She looks like she just got sprayed by karma itself." Derrick allowed himself a small smile. The trap had worked perfectly, but the fallout was only beginning. Karen stumbled around her yard, gagging and shrieking as the unbearable stench clung to her clothes, hair, and skin. She waved her arms like she was fighting off invisible bees, but nothing helped. The skunk, meanwhile, had darted out of her house and disappeared into the bushes, leaving behind its powerful calling card. Within minutes, neighbors gathered on sidewalks and porches. Some looked concerned, but most were trying, and failing, not to laugh. Mrs. Thompson, still in her gardening gloves, muttered, "Well, that's what she gets for sticking her nose where it doesn't belong." Malik kept recording from Derrick's car, whispering between chuckles, "Man, this is going viral. People won't believe it unless they see it." Karen, however, wasn't laughing. She ran to her hose and began spraying herself down, desperate to wash away the stench. But water only seemed to spread it more. The smell drifted across the block, making kids pinch their noses and parents wave their hands in disgust. Finally, Karen shouted at the growing crowd, "Stop staring, this isn't funny." Someone put a dangerous animal in a box on my porch. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A teenager down the street yelled, "Your porch? That's Derrick's package, lady." Heads turned toward Derrick's house. Derrick calmly stepped out onto his porch, coffee mug in hand, looking as innocent as ever. "Funny," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I had a package delivered this morning, but it seems to have disappeared again." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Eyes darted between Derrick and Karen, and suddenly the pieces started to click together. Karen's face turned bright red, partly from embarrassment and partly from rage. "You set me up!" she screamed across the street. Derrick just shrugged, his calm demeanor only fueling her fury. The truth was out, and the neighborhood wasn't on her side anymore. Karen stormed back into her house, fuming. The smell still clung to her like a cloud of rotten onions, no matter how much soap and vinegar she scrubbed with. Her rug was ruined, her reputation shattered, and worst of all, the entire neighborhood had witnessed her humiliation. She wasn't about to let Derrick get the last laugh. Late that night, Karen sat at her dining table, papers spread everywhere. She typed furiously on her laptop, drafting an official HOA violation notice addressed to Derrick. "Unauthorized wildlife endangerment," she muttered as she wrote. "Improper package handling. Property disturbance." She slapped the paper into an envelope with a triumphant smirk. The next morning, Derrick found the letter taped to his front door. Reading it aloud to Malik, who had stopped by, Derrick couldn't help but laugh. "She's accusing me of a skunk attack? Really? She stole my package, Malik." Malik chuckled. "Man, she's reaching harder than a kid trying to grab cookies off the top shelf." But Karen wasn't done. By noon, she was walking door to door, clipboard in hand, ranting about how Derrick had endangered the neighborhood by planting a wild animal in a box. She twisted the story, leaving out her theft and painting herself as the victim. Some neighbors humored her, nodding politely, but others weren't fooled. Mrs. Thompson shook her head. "Karen, we all saw you take his package. Don't pretend you were the victim." Karen's face burned with frustration. The usual authority she carried as HOA president seemed to be slipping away. People weren't listening like they used to. Meanwhile, Derrick kept his cool. He didn't need to defend himself. He had video proof of Karen stealing the box and dozens of witnesses who'd seen her meltdown. As he sat on his porch that evening, Derrick smiled to himself. Karen thought she could spin the story, but the truth had a way of catching up, especially when it stank as badly as hers did. Word of the skunk incident spread fast, and by the end of the week, the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Karen, of course, demanded it, insisting Derrick be punished for endangering the community. The meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, rows of folding chairs filled with residents, all buzzing with anticipation. Derrick sat calmly in the back, while Karen stood at the front, armed with her clipboard and a stack of papers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began dramatically, "what happened to me was nothing short of an attack. A wild animal was intentionally placed in a package to cause harm. This is not only reckless, it's criminal." Murmurs spread through the room, some skeptical, some amused. Derrick raised his hand. "With all due respect," he said evenly, "I think everyone here deserves the full story. May I show the video?" Karen's smug smile faltered. "Video?" Derrick walked up to the projector, plugging in a USB drive. Seconds later, the footage from his doorbell camera played on the big screen. Karen casually walking up his porch, picking up the package, and strolling away like it was hers. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Thompson leaned forward in her chair. "So she did steal it?" Karen jumped in, waving her arms. "That's not theft, it was neighborhood inspection." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Malik, seated near the front, raised his phone. "And here's part 2, he said, playing his recording of Karen screaming as the skunk sprayed her, followed by her frantic run into the yard. Laughter erupted across the room. Karen's face turned crimson. "This is harassment. You're all against me," she screeched. The HOA board exchanged uneasy glances. For once, Karen's iron grip over the neighborhood seemed to be slipping. Derrick didn't even need to argue. Her own actions were destroying her credibility. The tide was finally turning. The HOA meeting ended in chaos. Some residents left laughing, others shaking their heads, but nearly everyone agreed on one thing: Karen had crossed a line. For the first time in years, people weren't scared of her anymore. They were tired of her. Derrick walked out calmly. his phone buzzing with messages from neighbors thanking him for exposing the truth. Malik slapped him on the back. "Bro, you're a legend." Karen's reign of terror is crumbling, but Karen wasn't ready to give up. The next morning, she printed flyers and shoved them into mailboxes, warning the community about wild animal terrorism and accusing Derrick of being a danger to children and pets. She even threatened legal action, claiming she was traumatized by the skunk. The neighbors weren't buying it. At the mailbox station, Derrick overheard two men laughing as they read her flyer. "Man, she's lost it," one said. "She's blaming him when she's the one stealing boxes." Even Malik's toddler giggled as he crumpled up the paper. Meanwhile, Karen's house still reeked. No matter how much air freshener she sprayed or how many candles she lit, the odor lingered. Delivery drivers avoided her front porch, and neighbors crossed the street to steer clear of her lawn. She had become a walking reminder of her own downfall. One evening, Derrick was approached by Mrs. Thompson and a small group of residents. "We've had enough," she said firmly. "Karen's behavior doesn't reflect this community. At the next HOA election, we're voting her out." Derrick nodded, humbled. "I didn't want to start a war. I just wanted my packages back." Mrs. Thompson smiled. "Sometimes standing up for yourself inspires others to do the same." For the first time since moving to Willow Creek Estates, Derrick felt the neighborhood truly had his back. Karen's power was cracking, and soon it might break completely. Karen's pride had taken a beating, but she wasn't finished. If she couldn't control the neighborhood with fear, she'd try intimidation through the law. One afternoon, a letter arrived in Derrick's mailbox, an official-looking envelope stamped legal notice. Inside was a document claiming Karen intended to sue him for emotional distress, property damage, and endangerment. Derrick shook his head, chuckling. She's really going all in. He showed it to Malik, who nearly fell off his chair laughing. "Man, if she actually goes to court, she's going to embarrass herself even more. You've got video proof she stole from you." Still, Derrick wasn't reckless. He forwarded the letter to his cousin Tanya, an attorney downtown. Tanya skimmed the papers and smirked. "This isn't even a real filing, it's just a scare tactic. But if she wants to go to court, I'd be happy to represent you. For free." The thought of Karen facing Tanya in court almost made Derrick feel sorry for her. Almost. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down on her campaign. She marched door to door, warning people about Derrick's dangerous pranks. But instead of fear, she was met with sarcasm and rolled eyes. "Karen," Mrs. Thompson said, arms crossed, "we all saw the video. You stole his package. You're lucky he didn't press charges." Others started ignoring her altogether. Kids pointed and whispered as she passed by, and delivery drivers joked about leaving air fresheners on her porch instead of boxes. That evening, Derrick sat on his porch, watching the sun dip low. For the first time in weeks, his packages remained untouched. Karen's scare tactics weren't working. Her threats carried no weight. Across the street, Karen slammed her blinds shut, seething. She wasn't used to losing control, and though her neighbors had stopped listening, she was determined to make one final move. The next HOA meeting drew the largest turnout Willow Creek Estates had ever seen. The air was thick with tension as residents filed into the clubhouse, eager to see what would happen. Karen arrived first, dressed in a stiff business suit, her chin high despite the faint odor still clinging to her clothes. She slammed her papers onto the table. "I demand immediate removal of Derrick Johnson from this neighborhood. He's a menace, a trickster, and a danger to us all." The room buzzed with murmurs. Derrick walked in calmly, nodding at familiar faces who greeted him warmly. He didn't carry a stack of papers, just a USB drive in his pocket. When the floor opened, Karen launched into a dramatic speech about her trauma. She waved her arms, painting herself as a victim of Derrick's cruelty. "Do we really want to live in a place where skunks are used as weapons?" she cried. That's when Derrick stood. "If I may," he said, his voice steady. He plugged the USB into the projector once again. The footage rolled, Karen striding onto his porch, stealing the package, then screaming as the skunk sprayed her. The room erupted. Some laughed openly, others shook their heads in disbelief. Malik raised his hand. "With all due respect, Karen, if you hadn't stolen the box, none of this would have happened." Mrs. Thompson added sharply, "You've been bullying this community for years. Enough is enough." The HOA president cleared his throat. "Given the evidence and the testimonies from residents, I move that Karen be removed from her position effective immediately." A unanimous vote followed. Karen's face twisted in fury as she realized her grip on the neighborhood had slipped away for good. For Derrick, the moment wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And as the crowd clapped and cheered, he knew the neighborhood was finally free from Karen's reign of terror. The clubhouse echoed with applause as the vote concluded. Karen sat frozen in her chair, her eyes darting around the room in disbelief. For years she had lorded over Willow Creek Estates, barking orders and twisting rules to suit her will. Now, with one unanimous vote, it was all gone. When she finally stood, she tried to muster her authority one last time. "You'll regret this. You can't run this community without me." But her voice cracked, and the room answered with silence. Then, almost on cue, Malik coughed and said, "Smells like victory in here." The laughter that followed left Karen red-faced. By the next week, Karen had quietly resigned from the HOA and disappeared from neighborhood activities. Her house still carried faint traces of the skunk's odor, and few people stopped by to visit. Without her constant patrols, the neighborhood felt lighter, freer. Derrick, meanwhile, noticed something remarkable. Packages stayed on porches, lawns grew a little wilder, and people actually smiled more when they passed each other on the street. The community wasn't just free of Karen's control, it was finally beginning to feel like a community. One Saturday morning, Derrick hosted a barbecue in his backyard. Families brought side dishes, kids played tag, and Malik manned the grill. Mrs. Thompson raised a glass of lemonade and said, to Derrick, for standing up to Karen and reminding us we don't have to live under fear. Everyone cheered, and Derrick, though humbled, smiled warmly. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "Sometimes it just takes one push to remind people of their strength." As the evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Derrick leaned back in his chair, content. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek Estates, he felt truly at home. And though he hoped never to see another stolen package again, he had to admit, sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected and smelliest of forms.